May 21st, 2020. We're meeting through remote access. And I'd first like to read a statement from Governor Baker. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions
This
of the Open Meeting Law.
This conference will now be recorded.
General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Town of Harwich Conservation Commission on May 21st, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information on the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website at www.harwich-ma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so also via recording on demand on the Harwich Channel 18 website or on our Town of Harwich YouTube page, https://www.youtube.com/user/Harwich Channel 18/videos !disable_polymer=1. Well, thank you for all attending. I'd like to thank up front Conservation Department staff, Amy Usowski and Nikki Smith, for all the help they do to make this possible, and also thank all the commissioners for participating, and I hope everybody is healthy and doing well tonight. So the first item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability for 97 Pleasant Road, map parcel Z3-5, a proposal to enlarge a driveway. Is there a representative of this application here tonight?
I sent him the login information this morning because he was on last night instead. I haven't heard from him. I don't see his name on the list like I did last night. Do we maybe want to continue that until later on in the agenda and see if he shows up?
Yep, good idea. Okay. Next, we have an amended order of conditions for 33 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P3-0, proposed dead man tieback system and access improvements. I think we have Don Monroe on the line.
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chairman, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, if you want to give us a summary on what you have, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, sure. The project description was sent out, but so at the last meeting, because we didn't have the work landward of the steel sheet pile bulkhead completed, we asked the commission if it would be all right if we came back under an amended order and do an as-built plan of the things that are now basically completed. And of those items that are in the project description, we tried to let you know what we would be coming forward with. The access stairs, the tieback system, the dead man system, and the buttresses that were to be installed under the existing deck that's landward of the steel sheet pile bulkhead. The access stairs down to the dock and the capping of the steel sheet pile bulkhead. That's basically what we're here for. I submitted an as-built plan of that work, and we're here to discuss all that with the commission.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Sure, I'll try to keep it pretty brief. So I do recall at the meeting for the after the fact notice of intent for the emergency work on the bulkhead, for a new bulkhead essentially in front of the Helfrich property, that we did discuss that there would need to be an an amendment filed for work landward. I think and I do remember it being for stairs, tiebacks, things like that. But at the time, not all the details, it seemed, had been completely fleshed out. So in the meantime, the application has come in for essentially what you see on site now. So I was a little bit surprised to see that some of the work, and not just the tiebacks, because obviously that's needed for the bulkhead, but basically what else was being requested for in the amendment, which we haven't voted on yet, had been done. When the plans were presented to the commission for the bulkhead, it showed it to have a cap on it, which was a more traditional cap. I don't have it here in front of me. Well, I do in one of my file folders here. I was under the impression that based on the plan that was submitted, that the cap was going to be less than 2 feet wide or so, and it was going to be concrete, either or wood or steel, whatever that plan had said. So I was a little surprised when I was out on site and saw that there was a wooden walkway acting as a cap, and also it was between, some of it was 3 feet wide, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong, this might be on the other property, and we can discuss that, but not at length tonight because it's not an agenda item, but they're between 3 and 5 feet wide along the bulkhead. Mm-hmm. So again, this work wasn't part of an emergency, and probably it should not have been done prior to the amendment being heard. The other part of the amendment is replacement of the deck on the Harwich property, which did extend all the way to the bulkhead, with synthetic turf. This has already been done. Again, we knew an amendment was coming, and we instructed you that amendment was the proper avenue, but we didn't know the details necessarily of that, and that work should not have been done. Sorry, Stan was calling me, but I can't answer the phone. He must be having some issues. So, and then there are some other things that I think we should chat about in terms of where boats are being tied up along the pier and other things. So I think I will leave it at that for now, and I'll leave it up to you guys I'll be here if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, so the work was done, it seems, in accordance with what was allowed, with the exception of a few other things that were done. And Amy, do we have any clarification on boat occupancy? Is that something that is permitted through us? Is that something that was permitted through the harbor master?
So, and Mr. Helfrich, the owner, is on the line, and if he wants, he can unmute himself if you want, Mr. Chair. But I'll just say the Conservation Commission approved a plan for the dock at the Helfrich property, and I did put all that past information for you in your Dropbox, and Brad, I think I emailed it to you as well. It showed the dock plus the float, which went through a couple renditions in size. We did allow it to get bigger or change size. And then there was some dredging associated with that around the dock. And they have a permit to be able to maintenance dredge that area. As far as docks being tied up alongside piers, that's more of a harbor master thing, but we want to make sure that wherever there's a boat tied up, that there's adequate depth at mean low water underneath.
Right. Yeah, I'm asking these questions up front because some of them are outstanding, and I think it's probably best to get them squared away right away. Another one is was there any dredging this spring? From the correspondence I've seen, it sounds like there was not, but we also received some questions at a previous hearing and some other communications that suggested there was a dredge in the region. So can either Don or the applicant speak to that, if there was any dredging that occurred at this site this spring.
Sure. So can you hear me? This is Ben Halfrich. You can hear me? Great.
Yes, I can hear you.
So I received, let me start with the first item on the pile cap. So in the original plan that we filed, we called out, and in the narrative, we called out that we were going to use an NZ14 sheet or similar sheet pile. So the engineering wasn't complete at the time. So that's why we said, we're going to pick one of these sheets that meet the engineering requirements. So it was determined that we needed an NZ38 sheet. It's a 3/4 inch thick steel sheet pile. It weighs approximately, they're approximately 50 feet long and they weighed 10,000 pounds each. So the profile of that sheet is 3 feet wide. So when you put a cap on it, you put which we called out a timber on each side. By the time you put the timber on each side and you put the wood over the top, it's like 3 foot 11 inches wide going on top of that NZ38 sheet. So yes, it looked smaller on the drawing, but when we submitted that drawing, we had not finished the engineering and had determined what size sheet we needed because it was a work in process. So that's how that, I think that is a pretty good answer to the cap, how we got to the cap. And the other part was we called out on the drawing that we were going to infill between the vinyl sheet and the NZ38 sheets with 3-inch angular stone, and we were going to cap it with concrete. So the discussion was, okay, we have a Chapter 91 license, which has a stipulation in it that we have to allow public access up and over this dock. And we have to have a sign on each end. How do we enter, exit? Now, as the property owner, it's in our best interest to make sure that we give a safe passage. We thought that a timber cap would be much safer than a concrete or a steel cap. So that's how that decision came about. And the cap itself is the width of the sheet. And that's how that became what it is today. Now, with regard to dredging, I got an email from Don Monroe on April 16th, which was forwarded from Amy. And I'll just read the highlights of this email. I replied to, we were asked if there was any dredging going on this project. And my response was, and this is on record, and Amy has it, and I believe she forwarded to the commission members. I said, there's no dredging on this project as of this date. As you know, I asked to see if we could get permission from the state to do our maintenance dredging before the barge leaves. Now, I believe that went to Brad's office, and we got a reply back from Brad's office saying that they probably wouldn't approve that. So I went further to say, if we can't do the dredging now, the plan is to do it after June 1st per the provisions in the maintenance permit. Now, at the last meeting, we said, as you know, we removed approximately 90 yards of fill from behind the bulkhead on the land side. And we removed the old concrete seawall that was pushing out the vinyl sheet pile that was part of the failure issue. Now, I go on to say, as discussed at the last conservation meeting, we installed a concrete buttress system behind the new sheet pile on the land side. We have submitted as-built sketches. Once the buttress system was installed, the fill we removed from behind the wall was put back in place. The excess fill that remained on the barge was removed Tuesday and Wednesday of that week and removed off-site. So that was the fill from the land side. So we had a clamshell, and I think I'd want to say that, that was taking that out. And then I go on to say, the excess fill that remained, okay. Okay, then I went on to say we removed the concrete rubble from under the boathouse, that would be the southern boathouse, and along the north end of the Harbor Club building, and put the displaced sand behind the sheet pile. And then I go on to say that we'll be installing the trap rock on the north end of the Harbor Club. So I answered this on the 16th, exactly what we took out. No dredge material was taken out of this site. The we took out approximately 90 yards of fill from behind, and whatever we displaced from in front, we put back. Now, in the process of driving these sheet piles, we pulled out 4 engine blocks. There was some kind of steel structure and some concrete rubble that had been, so we had to pull that out of the way, and that was pulled out of the area. So that was all that was taken out. Now, I saw online what Tom Leach posted as us putting sand back behind the seawall, and that's exactly what I said we did, and that is what we did. But there was no dredging. The only plan is, after June 1st, is to notify the commission per the terms and conditions of our dredge permit that we will be doing maintenance dredging in that area. I hope that clears that up.
Yeah, thank you for that summary. Just aside, are you sure that June 1st is your start date?
It may be, Brad, it may be June 15th. I'm not, I'll check, but it's in the order.
Okay.
And it's pretty specific how much we can take out, where it has to go, and how it's recorded. And, you know, we've dredged, I believe we've done 3 maintenance dredging so far. I'm hoping that with this new sheet pile system that we put in there, this is going to end it. That's the plan anyways, and there shouldn't be any more erosion in that area.
Okay. All right, thanks for that summary. I think what we'll do now is we'll ask the commissioners to express any comments or ask any questions. Carolyn, can I start with you? I think you're still muted, Carolyn.
Thank you. I was down there this afternoon and looking around, and I don't know how else they could have done it in order to allow that public accessing around. And the boat was docked inside, which actually gives more room in the channel outside. So I'm not maybe we should have known ahead of time that they were doing it exactly this way, but I don't see that there's anything wrong with the way they did it.
Okay, thank you. Mark, I've got you next. Do you have any comments?
No, actually, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Jim, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you're up.
I don't particularly have a problem with the way the work has come out. You know, it's kind of tough to analyze and approve this to begin with the emergency order. You know, when we looked at that, it was late at night at the end of a meeting, and it didn't get much scrutiny, I don't think, by the commission. But that was the nature of the emergency order. Other than that, I don't have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Ernie, I've got you next.
Yeah, the couple comments. Do we know if well, let me preface this. I'm always troubled when Amy prefaces her comments with the proviso that, you know, I was surprised to see, because that means that she's not being kept informed with the work that's being done on these sites. And, you know, that's always troubling to me when that's sort of the lead into to these discussions. With respect to the dredging, so dredging has not been done yet. The boats are pulled in with the engines against the bulkhead, and I don't know that anybody has stated, and I don't see any of Vince's comments, that the 2.5 foot depth is there. Lacking that 2.5 foot depth, you know, should the boats be there? I don't think so, unless we can get some assurance that that's been adhered to. that area should be restored to the original condition, which had a T-dock. Boat was at the end of the T-dock, obviously had enough depth at that point in time. If you want to go ahead and dredge in the future and then change the profile of the docks so that the boats can back into that, then that's fine. But I have not heard anything that says that they've met the requirement for the 2.5 feet at this point.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what brought us here to begin with is when we did the dredging originally in 2012, maintenance dredging in 2013, 14, and 16, and then the yearly dredging in the channel, that area is quite deep now. So we have approximately 3 feet at low water, at low tide, beneath the boats. So that is quite deep. And that's why, frankly, that's why the boathouse to the north was, I'm sorry, the south boathouse was actually falling into the harbor, and why our vinyl sheet pile, why the tow failed and kicked out and washed out the fill from underneath our property. So that is quite deep now. So I have asked Amy and I've asked the harbor master what the process is to reduce my footprint in the resource area. So in other words, we did away with the T-float. We did away with 150 or 120 square feet in the resource area. We've moved back from the channel significantly, and we have the same depth. So I'm trying to find out what that process is. I haven't changed the location of the part that comes perpendicular from the shore. That's exactly as it was permitted. So the only thing we did was move the boats back because we have sufficient depth, and we did away with the T-dock. Now, Amy might be able to add some insight to this. I looked through the original order. The order only tells us that we can tie, it tells us how to tie the boat to the end of the T-dock. There's no restrictions that I can find on tying to the parallel part as long as we have sufficient depth. So I'm kind of up in the air. I want to be in compliance with this. If I have to do something different, I'm happy to do it. I'm not looking to dredge in that area. I have more than sufficient depth there. The problem, the depth issue is on the edge of the channel. There's like a shoal out there, right at, I would say, right off the corner of the Harbor Club, that should be addressed. Now, it may take care of itself or it may not, but in my license, I'm required to take care of any shoaling that takes place in that area. So I'm looking at that shoaling in that area probably from the dredging that we did originally. So it has to be addressed. There's sufficient depth there now, but I'd like to address it. I don't have to do it this year, and I can do it at another time. But I figured while the work was going on, I'd get it done. So I hope that clears up some of those questions. And I should probably spend some time with the harbor master and find out if I am supposed to do something different if I decrease the size of my license structure. I haven't put it in a different spot. I've just decreased the size of it.
Can I make a couple comments, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
So I think what would be good to do is to take a measurement at mean low water, and see what your depth is at a couple of different spots, essentially along your bulkhead or along your pier then, to make sure that at mean low you have the required depths.
That's a great idea.
Yep, and that way we can document it and put that in your file. I mean, this has gone through, many different renditions over, at least my time here and before that, I'm sure. So just having accurate record of everything is kind of critical when you have so many plans. And then if what you have out there in terms of configuration is less than what you're permitted, it would be good to have, and if that's how you're planning on keeping it, then it would be good to have an existing conditions plan
Sure.
essentially, of your structures. Again, so we don't run into the issues of, making sure things are, essentially, we want to make sure we're looking at the plan of what's out there. We haven't.
So we can do that. We'll finish that up with the as-built. I'll have Coastal do soundings and get exactly what we have in that area. As far as documenting what we have, that'll be on the as-built, but I think Dawn can probably weigh in on this better on, because I think we also have to, I don't know, Dawn, maybe you could tell us, is there something else we have to do to document?
Only what the town's asking you to do, because as far as your license goes, if you elect not to put your T-float in, you still have a license for that. That doesn't obviate the license. We can let Brendan know that may be what you want to do so that he doesn't think that you're abandoning it. Because if you have the depth and you don't need it, then why bother putting it out? Because it does increase the width of the channel. Will actually access for other people. So if the town's asking for soundings, we can do that, and we can do it. I think we have the as-built plan basically almost done as you see it right now. We just have to put some topo, some shots on it to see what the depths are along the dock. And if they have that in their file, then they know that you're potentially not going to use the T-float anymore. But I'm not sure. You're going to have to make that call, Vin. I don't know if you want to relicense it without the T-float.
No, I mean, I'd like to leave it so that I can put the T-float out there, but I think it's in everybody's best interest. Certainly people using the harbor, that we don't have the T-float out there. It gives more access in that area, for the young kids sailing through there. They won't be smashing into the boat anymore. Gives them more navigable width. I think it's better off to leave it out of there. But the time may come that this shoals in and I can't get a dredge permit for whatever reason. I'd want to be able to still put my float out there. But I don't think that's going to be an issue. So I think Amy has the right idea. Get the soundings in there, get it on the plan, and just assure that we have sufficient depth.
Okay. We'll provide that.
Dawn, when do you think those measurements will be made?
I think I can have Keith go out and do those tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep. I just got an email from him. He's late on work, so.
Amy, is there any chance for you or Nick to get out there when the measurements take place?
I'd have to know when. I have a couple of appointments tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But if I can be there, I would love to be. So.
Okay.
Yeah, let's coordinate it so we can do it on Amy's schedule. I would like her to be out there and so that she can see what we have. So there's no questions on any of this. I mean, I think you have the right soundings there, but I think it would be great to have Amy be at the site.
Okay.
I'd like to come by, but I'll be off Cape tomorrow.
All right, Brad. We'll coordinate that through Amy at her schedule, and Keith will do it when she's available, and maybe she can coordinate when you might be available, and maybe we can do it at low tide so the measurement will be an exact measurement. We can time it based on the tide charts.
Yeah, I'll be off Cape from, let's see, from probably 10 to 3 tomorrow. I don't know when low tide is, but maybe not, or another day. But
hello, everyone. I don't want to interrupt, but just real quick, it's Heinz Prof, Natural Resources Director. Tomorrow morning, low tide at Witchmere, 6:18 a.m.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants
to make that. We'll do it another day because the tides will be coming around. So maybe it'll be later in the day next week. Is that okay through the chair?
All right. I think it's important, if we look at the plans from March 11th, 2020, these plans don't show there's much water there, and nor do they show the shoaling off the edge of the Witchmere section. So I think it's pretty important to nail these down, and it'll have a lot to direct us as to what we decide here. So pretty important measurements.
When that plan was given, when we put that plan together, we didn't do any soundings. Those were
Right.
taking off, that was just cutting and pasting an old drawing. So we should definitely get something current.
Yes. Okay, Ernie, any follow-up comments?
No, thanks, Brad. I think the discussion was very helpful and covered a lot of them. Thank you.
Okay. Stan, you're up. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was moving my laptop and I hit my off button. When I came back up, everybody was here, but I couldn't hear anything. That's why I left the meeting. But so I never got to hear Amy's comments. But I guess I had a question when I went out there today. And things like the storage area and everything, I didn't recall that being part of the plan. I'm not saying it wasn't. But I just go back to when this was all approved, it was an emergency plan to shore up a wall that could possibly have immediate failure. And the work that I saw done there under an emergency order was much more than what I would have expected under an emergency order. Now, I'm not arguing that it shouldn't have, I think it was well done and put together, and maybe it just should have been done on a regular order, not under emergency order, to have done as much work that was done out there.
If I could,
That's my comment.
reply to that, the town building inspector came out and looked at the property and was the one that determined that this is an emergency that was in peril and imminent failure was going to happen. Now, I can tell you, we had substantial damage done to the property because of the failure. So I understand what you're saying, but as the property owner, to me, it was certainly an emergency, and it was to the town building inspector, and I think we acted prudently and accordingly. And we tried to be as transparent as possible on everything. And if we missed any steps, we'll rectify whatever we have to. But let me assure you, I've been an engineer for 40 years. This certainly constituted an emergency as far as I was concerned. So, I mean, we had some significant damage due to it. So I'm glad I'm thrilled that you approved it as an emergency because it would have been much worse if we waited.
I'm not disagreeing with the emergency. I guess just my thinking of, from an emergency standpoint, it was more being of a temporary shoring up of the situation and then going to put together a complete plan, which was eventually done. I mean, it's taken 5 months. There's still people working there. That, to me, in my mind, isn't an emergency at this point. Emergency means a quick fix to shore up the property and then continue from there. That's my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Stan. I think, we'll always have, some disagreement on this, but I do feel that the problem was identified quite a while ago, and it should have been a notice of intent. The way the process went, it was impossible for the commissioners to really dig in and review this project. So I also agree with you, Stan. I think it should have been a regular notice of intent when the problem was identified about a year or more ago. So we're past that at this point. So it's an expression of frustration, I think, because it's been so difficult to review this project the way it has gone forward. So I think any other follow-up comments from the commissioners after hearing what we've heard? Okay, so I guess we want to get some measurements. I guess I'd like to hear back from Amy on the nature of the activity that wasn't permitted. And so would that work should have been done as an amendment? How should have that been permitted? And how concerning is that activity?
Well, Brad, I would my position on this would be is everything that we put in the narrative and on the emergency order, we've done everything exactly per that order, with the exception of the tieback system and the stair and access location. So I think we followed the letter of the emergency completely. Now, please bear in mind here that this is an adjacent project. So had all of the decisions been mine, I would have started day one. But there's a huge corporation that I'm working aside of that we're trying to coordinate. So, that put some time delays on this. But as far as we stayed within the complete bounds of in my opinion, we stayed within the bounds of the emergency order, the narrative, and we came in with an after the fact, which we're here for tonight, for the things that we couldn't address at that time.
Amy, would that include the walkway on the bulkhead?
So it's a difficult subject, I guess, because the after the fact notice of intent was really for the emergency work. In my opinion, not all the things, the tiebacks, we needed to do those as part of the project, but some of the more aesthetic things for the project, potentially the cap or the decking, the changing of the deck to synthetic turf, even though it's, they're very similar in terms of what the commission would consider them in terms of coverage and whatnot. Those really shouldn't have been done until the commission heard the amended order. Anything that was structurally connected to the bulkhead and needed to be done, I could see that would need to be done prior to tonight. But some of the more finished work, if you will, of the project that is still within our jurisdiction really shouldn't, in my opinion, have been done prior to the commission's been given approval of it. And I really do want to see an existing conditions plan out there. So I want to look at a variety of things. A commissioner who was not able to be present tonight was curious about the pilings, and because piling locations have changed, and we have some documentation of that over the years of that being changed. But having piling locations, structure locations, everything on one existing conditions plan would be extremely helpful. And then I think I don't think there was a lot of I've hoped that there was not a lot of negative impact here, and that it is all as you're saying it is. But I just want to make sure, and I just hope for better communication in the future on this. And I do think that we should have a similar discussion maybe next meeting with the Witchmere. They're not on the agenda tonight, but this is an adjacent project. And I do know I can see somebody from the Witchmere is on the call listening. But I think it's critical that we all get on the same page, because I feel like I was not privy to a lot of information about what was going on out there.
Thank you, Amy. And it's been tough for all the commissioners too, because if you look at the plan we have now, we simply could not envision this from what was presented late that night as an emergency order. So I think it is prudent that we get the updated plan and we revisit this when we can. When would you like to continue until? Next meeting or the meeting after?
When is the next meeting so that we can make sure we get the soundings done?
June 3rd, is it, Amy?
June 3rd. Mm-hmm.
When the one after that, we could get the soundings and people could come to the site like you, Amy, and Brad while we do it, but we won't be able to process all that data in one day. It usually takes a little bit of time to process the data and draft the plan up. So you could have the information in your hands the day you're there if we do it at a low tide. But then we'd have to produce the plan, the data. So what's the meeting after June 3rd?
I think it's the 17th. It's the third Wednesday.
So I would like it then, because June 3rd is only couple of weeks away.
Right. That's okay with me. It's okay with the rest of the commission.
And through the chair, while we're talking about the neighboring property, am I hearing that we need to file a similar process, through a similar process that we're going through right now? Meaning we filed this as an amendment, but work was done. So I'm not sure what you want to do, or is it going to be on the agenda as discussion, or what?
I think maybe, well, Brad, if I might, maybe we can have a discussion, John, you, me, and Bill Ganchert from the Witchmere, or anybody from the Witchmere who wants to take part, and just go over, look over the plans together. Haven't had a chance to do that before. I mean, I might tentatively put you on for June 3rd for discussion, but prior to that, I'd like to have a meeting with you folks and just go over the plans with you.
Is that a good path to follow, Don?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we might be waiting for Bill to chime in. Is Bill Ganchert on the line? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
It's okay with me. The plan that you have in front of you now basically only shows the work that was done in Ben's location. We do show the outline of the decking that's to the south, but you notice we don't have the bulkhead underneath it and all that, so we could, and when you say plans, Amy, which plan, are you meaning a plan that's similar to this one or the one you already have?
What I'd like to do, I don't think Bill's on the call anymore. He was a little bit earlier, but what I'd like to do is take what you proposed for the emergency, the original plan for the emergency, the as-built that you did for the bulkhead, and then compare, and just go out there and compare to what's there now.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
And we could even potentially time that around well, that can be whenever, honestly.
We can do that on the 3rd. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so we'll have discussion on the 3rd for the Witchmere. But prior to that, I'd like to meet up with you all, well, Witchmere and you, Don, and go over stuff, okay?
Can you hear me now, Amy?
Yes, hi, Bill.
Yeah, sorry, my microphone was shut off. Yeah, that's fine with me. I'll meet, you tell me when I'm there.
I'll send an email around tomorrow. It'll probably be Tuesday or Wednesday next week.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Any additional comments from the commissioners? Okay, well then I move we continue the amended order of condition for 33 Snow Inn Road until June 3rd.
I'll second that.
Second? Okay, seconded by Ernie.
Through the chair, before you vote, wasn't it going to be the week wasn't it going to be the meeting after that for this one?
The 17th.
17th, Brad.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we're going to have discussion, just keep a placeholder for discussion. Is that a good idea, or just wait?
No, that would be good for Witchmere, yes. But for Helfrich, because we're going to have data and a plan, it would be better on the 17th.
All right, well then I amend my motion to have the hearing on June 17th.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ernie again. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we have a notice of intent for 220 Long Pond Road. I think we're all set, right, clear to discussion, aren't we?
We're all set. And now we, maybe we should check if the representative for 97 Pleasant is on the call, Mr. Cassaboon.
Hi, this is Mike Adams. John
Hi.
couldn't make
Oh, hi.
it. Hi, how are
Oh,
you? I'm sorry I'm late.
No worries. We held a spot for you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So you're the
wanna-
owner, Mike?
Do you want to briefly describe your project?
Yeah, I think we were trying to go a little wide on the driveway. And John went out, I think, with you, Amy, to redo the plan. And we were just going to extend the driveway forward more. And John resubmitted the plan. That's what I know about it right now.
Okay. Any comments for us, Amy?
Yep. At the last meeting, the original proposal was to create more pervious driveway closer to the wetland than existing conditions, if you will, there. And the direction of the commission was that you shouldn't go closer to the wetland. And the commission and myself understood that this is a very difficult lot. Not only is it a flag-shaped lot with basically, a very narrow driveway that's bordered exactly by the abutting property and a wetland, but it potentially could be difficult for emergency vehicles as well. And there's really not a lot of room to add more of a parking space or turnaround there. So with that in mind, knowing that we really couldn't get completely out of the 50-foot buffer, I met Mr. Casabone on site, and what I had suggested was, instead of getting closer to the wetlands, that they extend it to the north a little bit. And it looks like there's already some vehicle tracks from getting into the backyard as well. So what you see on your plan is a 30 by 18 foot driveway addition. What's in that area is pretty much just Cape Cod lawn, with the exception of two tupelos that they would like to remove. It's really hard to mitigate. So typically within the 0 to 50 foot no disturb zone, if you will, Mr. Adams, that you have, that's our no disturb to the wetland. We require 3-to-1 mitigation, meaning 3 times the amount of mitigation or replanting than what you're disturbing. However, that's pretty much an impossibility on your lot. It is very natural towards the wetland, which we appreciate. So long story short, we can grant a variance if there's a hardship. And if we find that what you're proposing to do is not going to have an adverse impact to the resource area. So my opinion is that adding pervious, native stone or shell in the location that you and Mr. Casabone have come up with would not have an adverse impact to the resource area. But I would like to see a couple of trees, probably tupelos or red maples, planted in the location that you had previously requested the driveway to be, in order to enhance that buffer zone a little bit. So with that change, I would recommend approval.
Thank you, Amy. Let's get some comments from the commissioners. I'll start with Carolyn.
I think that this is clearly a case of hardship, and if Amy is comfortable with this being as far away from the protected area as possible, then I'm comfortable with the project.
Thank you. Let's see. Mark?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Few things. Overall, I think the project is worth doing. I'd like to see some adjustments, however. I'd like to see the driveway surface. The grade should be adjusted on the path going down along the wetland, and make sure it's pitched back in a northerly direction. It should be elevated about 6 inches. There's a depression right there in the center of that road that can capture all the water. If you're limited to native stone, it would be a good opportunity to deter any washing and trap the water over there on the left-hand side as you drive in. Also on the right-hand side, there's been a lot of debris over a period of time that's been pushed down that slope and pushed into that little swamp down there. I think some of that stuff could be removed. There's an opportunity to get in a half a dozen or 8 good-sized blueberry bushes in some of the clearing, and that might deter some of that and would also bring in a little bit of wildlife. Going further into the house, the parking area, as long as that's covered with native stone, either 3/4 or 1.5 inches, that would take away any soil movement underneath. I'd recommend not to mix it with shell, just to keep the fines out of it so you can manage the water a little bit better. But overall, as long as those things are accommodated, I can see it being generally very positive.
Thanks, Mark. Very good comments. Jim?
Yeah, I agree with Mark's comments, and I think the project can generally go forward. I guess my main comment would be, I'm wondering if some more shrubs or different plantings would be better than just two Tupelo trees. I think those are kind of hard to get started from a seedling or a small tree. I know the deer like to just eat them right up, and maybe planting a few decent sized shrubs, like Mark said, of blueberry trees or sweet pepper bush or something like that would be a better barrier and more likely to survive. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Jim. Stan?
I wouldn't even try to disagree with anything with Mark said. It sounds good to me.
Ernie?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the comments that have been made already. I'm fine.
Thank you. And I agree as well. I agree with Carol, and I think this is one of the few cases I've seen that has really hit the mark with a hardship application given the safety issue. And I think with Mark and Jim's comments on beefing up the plants, I think that it's probably a good way to go forward. So, any additional comments? Sorry.
If you're going to move to approve, I would say, just to let you know, it'll be a -3. And I would be happy to meet with Mr. Cassaboon, who's on the call, as well as the Adams family, to go over the plantings when they're ready.
Okay. Any comments from the proponent on?
No, Amy, I'd be happy to meet with you anytime.
Okay. Do those suggestions sound appropriate for you?
They sound good to me. I just, I guess as you're going down the driveway, what Mr. Coleman was talking about, I guess there's a lot of tree branches and debris. Is that what you're talking about, that you would like to see removed?
Yes, on the right-hand side, going down to the water, you can see where the leaves and so forth have been blown down the bank. And there's some pine branches and so forth that have been cut off and tossed down there in over a period of time. I mean, it's understandable. It would have been easy to do, but nonetheless, it probably should be cleaned up.
All right, no, I can do that. I can take a look at that. And also, I know there's a big pile of oak debris that was left over from the hurricane or some windstorm at the end that has to be removed, and I can do that also.
Yeah, right at the beginning of the driveway on the right when you come in. Yeah.
Correct. I'll take care of that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none, would one of the commissioners like to make a motion on this RDA?
I move go ahead if you like.
No, go ahead. You're fine, please.
All right. Will we approve the request for determination of applicability to 97 Pleasant Road to enlarge the driveway with a -3 determination?
Okay, can we please have a second?
Okay.
Okay, second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask Mr. Coleman a question, please?
Sure.
Mr. Coleman, you were saying something about the driveway. You'd like something about the pitch. So in other words, you wouldn't want to see native stone just put on top of what's already there. You'd want to change the pitch in some way?
Right, super elevate the right-hand side, the water side, lift it up by about 6 inches and let the water.
Okay, so in other words, so water.
So the water dissipates and goes back towards the wood line and not out over that berm.
And then go into the swamp area, you mean? Okay.
To deter it from
Right.
going.
Okay, I understand, sir. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
no problem. Thank you.
Okay, Amy, I think that leads us to discussion. Is that where we are?
We have an extension request. Wait, did we do the extension request yesterday? Continuation? Let me check.
I think we did.
For permit key? Okay.
Yeah.
Then yes, we would be going to discussion, and I know he's on the line. So first would be Al Borges of 510 Pleasant Lake Avenue to discuss some activity on his pond front. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll just leave it over to Al, and then when he's done, I'll be happy to make comments.
Super. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Borges, if you'd like to provide a summary.
Okay, hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Al Borges. I did this work. I didn't have it planned. I didn't want to do it. The only reason I cut down these trees is because we had the tornado, and I left pictures with Amy, and it was a very unsafe situation. The trees were all over the beach. So I did cut down the trees, and then they left stumps. So I had somebody take out the stumps. And when they did, it was all black underneath. So I brought in sand to cover the black. And that's the work I did. I didn't want to do it. We were happy with what we had. The only reason I did is because of the tornado knocked them down.
Okay, so how much sand did you bring in?
I brought in the truckload.
Mm-hmm.
Like 10 yards, I believe.
Yeah, it was about 10 yards.
Yeah, and what's the status with the shed?
Okay, I put up the shed. I didn't know, but it seemed like every beach on this street almost has a shed. I asked them if I could put one. They said yes, but you have to put a plastic one to be in compliance. Not you. I didn't get official. So I went out and bought a plastic shed because they said it was environmentally safe. So I did buy a plastic shed and I put it on the property because last year we had a few things stolen off the beach, going back and forth every day with everything. So that's why we put the shed. I mean, I won't put anything anymore before coming to you, but that's.
All right, well, thank you for that. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Yeah. So it came to our attention that some sand, the first thing people told me was there was some sand being put on the beach and asked me if they had a permit for sand. And I said they didn't. So I went out and took a look and met Mr. Borges, and maybe it was your son, Mr. Borges, on the site.
Yes.
And okay. And they were putting sand down, and I could see my least concern is actually the trees. It was very clear that trees were uprooted based on the photos what I had seen on the site and the photos that Mr. Borges sent, which I gave to the commissioners as well. So the trees in the future, if you have tree damage, we're really easy about, if you have hazard trees, just give us a call and send us pictures, and we can just give you an okay to take care of downed trees that are in, that are a danger. We try to be pretty easy about that. But sand nourishment, It is something that we do permit. We also want to make sure the sand is compatible. This is pretty fine beach sand there. And what we like to know ahead of time really is we like to have a handle on what current size your beach is to make sure that you are not enlarging your beach by putting additional sand there. It did look a little bit bigger, but it could have been where those other trees came down as well. So the biggest concern I had was for the shed, and we have had a couple of people also have enforcements to remove sheds that were brand new on the side of basically on this stretch of the lake. We had somebody remove a patio earlier this year. We had somebody remove a retaining wall. So the reason being is the 50-foot is from the wetland is really our no disturb zone and no new structures. It's a town bylaw. And I don't know the rule that plastic sheds are any different from the, a building permit standpoint than a wooden shed or a metal shed would be. We actually do in town hall in the building department have what's called a shed registration for sheds, regardless of what material they are, that are under 200 square feet in size have to be registered. So, and it's really just about being consistent with other applicants who come in front of the Conservation Commission looking for structures in the 50-foot or 60-foot no disturb zone. And I unfortunately, and I understand, the issue with having to cart your stuff back every day or having things stolen, but our job is to consistently apply our regulations. And we are going to continue to work with the landowners on this side of the pond as well. Unfortunately, I can't recommend the shed. I would recommend that I meet with Mr. Borges when he can and look at where, the parameters of where the beach are and have him file administratively for an after the fact administrative review for the sand nourishment provided. But that the shed, unfortunately, I can't recommend keeping the shed in that location. On your, on your property somewhere, yes, but.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Let's have comments from the commissioners. I'll start with Carolyn.
I agree with everything that Amy said. Take a look. A little bit of increase in the amount of sand doesn't bother me too much, but the shed does. And luckily it's plastic, so it can be moved intact without damage to the structure. So I think it should not be allowed.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. I understand the issue about the shed and the convenience and all that, but unfortunately, it's just not permitted. The additional sand, I don't even have a particular issue with that. So I guess really that's all I can add.
All right, thanks. Ernie?
Yeah, I'm fine with the comments that have made. There's one issue before us as well as far as the dock storage. And I don't have any problem with them storing it on the beach there. You mentioned tying it down, and that's fine as well. The only comment I have is with respect to the sand. I noticed that the sand that's been spread is already washed out. So there's like a 6-inch cliff basically from where the sand was spread before to where the waves have taken it back out. So would we allow them to increase the slope of the beach out into the water to try to prevent some of that washout?
I would think so. Originally I had only allowed Mr. Borges to push the sand off the bike trail. And then we were getting complaints yesterday with all the wind coming in that that the sand was blowing back across the bike trail because I hadn't had to push it back far enough. So in order to quickly do that, I talked to Mr. Borges yesterday and we agreed that the town would go in and push it back. So I told the town not to push it too far. But yes, I mean, we shouldn't have increased erosion into the pond. So I'm happy to meet with the owner on site and discuss the slopes.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, I have no other comments.
Thank you. Jim?
Yep, I agree about the removal of the shed. I'd be in favor of issuing a fine for maybe just a single $300 fine for the incident as a whole, even if there were multiple things that happened. So it seems like maybe some of the firewood should be removed. I didn't get to look at that too closely, but see what Amy thinks about that. It should be noted that stumps should generally be left along pond shores, even if some of the tree has to be removed. They generally will resprout and regrow, and they're holding together that pond shore. They're part of the habitat. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Jim. Stan?
Well, once again, being last, there's not much to say here other than what's been said before. Although I do have a kind of a problem with the docks being stored there. I thought we've been trying to enforce that whole beachfront there to store docks off the beaches. And if I recall, to move that dock is a fairly flat area to move across to their property on the other side of the street, as opposed to some other docks that we've told people that we have to have them move their docks in much tougher locations than that. So I would be against storing those docks during off season on the beach there.
Thanks, Dan. And I guess I'll follow up on just one comment. I agree with everything. I would like to say that I think the nourishment is a significant concern to me. It's 10 cubic yards, very important nearshore habitat there. So you're smothering aquatic organisms. There's things that are happening when that sand migrates. And so to do it without a permit is very concerning to me. To have a contractor who really should know they need a permit for this, I could understand the owner not knowing, the regulations, being new to the property, but overall having the contractor bring a truck in that condition without a permit is really distressing to me. So I agree with Jim. We should issue a fine and remove the shed. And I also agree with Stan. I don't support off-season storage of the docks on the beach. So, Amy, I guess you're looking for a motion on an enforcement action. Is that where we are?
Brad, I have a couple questions for you. Sure. Are you suggesting the fine be levied against the contractor?
We haven't had a lot of success with that. Sorry, Amy, go ahead.
The contractor brought the sand to the site. The owner was spreading it. And I don't know who the contractor is.
Okay. I'll pay the fine, if that's okay with the board.
And then the second comment I have, Brad, is with respect to the docks on the sand there. I look at it from the perspective of whether or not it's going to have an adverse impact on the resource area there. And I don't think, if you look along that whole stretch, the docks are everywhere. And they're all on that side of the road. With the clearing that's there, I don't see that the docks are necessarily going to have an adverse impact.
I guess if they could get up, into some of those properties have a little bit of tree line, a little bit of upland bush. But to leave them on the beach, I don't think that's really appropriate with our regulations. So it is difficult to get them across the street, I understand. But, you're talking, 0 to 50 habitat. And so you're leaving a structure there for a good number of months. I don't think it's a good practice.
we did permit one that was being stored essentially on top of a retaining wall that was there before the regulations were put into place. So we did allow that. I would personally, if you, as opposed to storing it kind of in a wooded shrubby area, I'd prefer to see it on the beach if you were to leave it in this area so it wouldn't hamper any native vegetation. Or it's either, in my opinion, it could be left on the beach and tied down and away from the water, or should be moved across the street in the off season.
So where are we with that, Amy? Have we received a request for off-season storage, or we just noticed they were there?
No, we noticed they were there. A letter had gone out, and I don't have it here in front of me. Mr. Borges bought the property in 2018. Is that correct?
December of 2018, yes.
Okay, so I'd have to see, that was right around the time that we sent letters to everybody on that section of the shore. And I'd have to check and see if it was the previous owner or you who received the letter about the dock. It wasn't originally part of the topic for discussion tonight. And then when we did some research kind of on the property, we said, well, we got to get this taken care of too.
Hey, Amy.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm just looking up. I have another computer that I'm.
No, I just had one other question. Going back to your notes too, there was the comment that the sand that was used came off Cape. Is that a concern? The fact that it was, I think it was indicated that the owner thought it came from Leominster.
Well, who knows where this, that's where the company evidently was from. I don't know where the sand originated. It is beach sand, what's down there. And you don't find beach sand naturally in Leominster. So it is somewhat compatible. It's not bank sand, but this section of the pond is more of a sandy, low-lying area than some of the steeper banks that are rockier, have that type of a sediment there. So I'm not too concerned with the sediment quality as much as maybe the quantity. But typically we would like to see native sand, not stuff brought in from off Cape.
And Amy, how would this be typically handled? Would this be done through an RDA or, beach nourishment on a great pond? I wouldn't expect that would be done administratively, but how have we done it recently?
It was, we did after 2 years ago when we had really, really high groundwater and we were having a lot of erosion. You folks let me on a case-by-case basis, pretty much on Sequattam Road where they had more washout. There was only like 3 or 4 cases there. You allowed me to let them to work with minimal, small amounts of sand there administratively under that circumstance. But typically it would be an RDA for sand nourishment, if not a full notice. But I don't think this is enough to constitute a full notice.
Okay, so it'd be after the fact administrative review.
You could either that or the RDA. I'm comfortable with meeting with Mr. Borges on site and just getting a clear grasp of where the previous beach used to be versus what's there now, and making sure we stay consistent.
Okay. Yeah, my concern is these are natural processes, and I just worry about it increasing, and all of a sudden folks are wanting to put down, larger amounts,
yeah.
and that's going to degrade the nearshore habitat, So, okay. Well, I guess I'd like to make a motion, but before I do, I want to ask folks if we should petition the question on storage, because I'm going to motion to remove the shed and have a fine for the event. And I'd like to also motion that we don't allow off-season storage. But if that's going to bog things down, we can separate the two items. Do people have a preference?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the off-season storage is not allowed unless it is specifically allowed in the order of conditions. So it'd be for telling the owner to not store his stock there.
I agree with Jim. Okay, well, unless, you know, we can have...
Brad, I thought your question was whether or not we have one motion or two motions.
Well, it was because it could bog things down discussion-wise, because I think people are in favor of the shed removal and a fine, and but I don't want to bog discussion down and have to reissue the motion. But either way, I'm prepared to go either way.
Where is this dock right now?
What was that?
Can he put the dock in the water now?
I'm putting the dock in the water tomorrow.
Okay, so tomorrow there will not be a violation. I wonder if we need to wait until he has a violation to make a motion that he has to store it elsewhere.
I think the violation, Carolyn, is tied more to the shed than the dock itself.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's totally separate in my mind. So I would be in favor of two separate motions or only one motion dealing with the dock, dealing with the fine and the shed, and waiting till the fall to see if he puts the dock on the beach again, knowing that we don't approve of it.
Well, you know what? I will separate the motions. I will do that, but I think we should settle it now since we have the proponent here and we've all had a little discussion. So I think let me go ahead and then we move to ask the proponent to work with Amy with an after-the-fact administrative order for the nourishment, issue a fine of $300 for the unauthorized nourishment, and then require the removal of the shed from the beach. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, and any discussion? Any comments from anybody in the audience?
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
That shed's like in about 80 pieces. It took us a long time, so it might take me a little time. How much time do I have to take it down? That is not, you cannot just take it and pick it up because it's plastic. It all falls apart. That's way more pieces than I anticipated. It's going to take a little time. It took us like a whole day to put it together.
Do we want to say, what do you need, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
That would be fine. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then we'll say 3 weeks for removal. And with that, all those in favor with the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, the motion carries unanimously. And now for the storage, I would like to propose that we don't allow off-season storage of the docks for this property. And is that appropriate, Amy, in this context?
Yeah, I can, we came down pretty hard on a few people on the shoreline, and I know we are still working with others to become compliant. But it would be consistent to not allow the dock here. And I'm happy to talk with Mr. Borges about alternative locations on the property to store it. Okay.
Okay. So I move that we do not allow beach storage for this property off season. And what would the timing be? I guess October 15th to May 15th, I think, is the period.
May 15th to October 15th.
Yep.
Well, that's
when
it's in the water, so the opposite.
Yep. Okay. Could I have a second, please?
I second it.
All right. Seconded by Stan. Discussion? Anybody have any comments?
I do. In this application, I fail to see where there's any detriment to it. I understand maybe it's not in total compliance with regulations, but there's a lot of cases where I don't believe there's any consequence for it. And as long as it was stored and elevated, I don't see where it would be an issue.
Okay. Any additional comments?
I think it becomes an issue of consistency. How do you're going to be coming kind of subjective on every single case as to who can leave it back and who can't. So I think you got to be consistent with our bylaws and regs.
Yeah, but Stan, I'm sorry, Mark. I tend to agree with Mark that we have to apply our bylaws and our regulations based on the impact they have on the resource areas. And if there is no impact, then I think we're within our bounds to allow it.
Right. That's exactly what I was trying.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a good line of reason, and I would just like to say that I think in some cases you absolutely have shading and obstruction of plant growth from this off-season storage. You know, in salt marsh, it's just blaringly obvious. In these pond situations, it depends where you put them. But in many cases, you've got a large chunk of the year where these things are not allowing plants to grow as they should. And to me, that's a concern. And I think Stan's comments are valid. And there's other aquatic life that are using these habitats in the off season as well. And that can be impaired. So I just think there's such a strong reason for having a true no disturb zone. And not allowing structures to be stored in the off season. So that's where I'm coming from.
The only thing I would add, in this particular application where the beach is wide open, and other cases where the beaches are wide open, if the dock is elevated and put out in the open, I just fail to see where there's any impact. So that's all.
Yep. Okay. Any further comments? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, Jim, did you say affirmative as well?
Yes.
Okay. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so I think the motion carries 4-2. Okay. Like that concludes our business with Mr. Borges. Any additional comments tonight?
Can I just ask one more question? So,
Sure.
Amy, I'll be down there tomorrow. Are you going to come see me, or who do I pay the fine to? What do I do? I just want.
Well, we would mail it to you, and the directions would all be in there. So I'm going to send a follow-up letter. I'll use the address that we have at our tax office.
Okay.
And it'll have all the directions and everything for you there. Because I may not be able to meet with you tomorrow, but it'll have what you need to do there, and then hopefully sometime in the next week or 2 or 3, you and I can meet down there, okay?
Can I spread the rest of the sand to get it off the bank and get it on the brown dirt so it doesn't?
I just don't cover any vegetation, okay?
I will not. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Borges. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for this. I had put it in an email to you, and I put some information in Dropbox for the commissioners. I had told Mr. Barton of 11 River Pine Circle that we could discuss an item for him for tonight, and it was my mistake. It didn't make it formally on the agenda, but I'm hoping we can at least speak with him about it and give him some direction. He is on the call. And basically what he would like to do is replace his pipe piles that hold his float with permanent piles due to the location they're at in the river with the swift current. He can tell you more, but the boat broke off. They've lost those pipes before, and it would be consistent. It wouldn't be a major modification or anything to his Chapter 91 license or anything, but he's asking to put 2 permanent pilings in. And if it's okay with you, can we hear from Mr. Barton?
Sure.
Okay, Chris. Chris?
Are you on, Mr. Barton? Is he still with us, Amy?
Yeah, I see him here with his microphone on. Oh, here he comes. I see a picture for him. Nobody's in it. Chris, there was also, if you're listening, if you can hear us, you may not have a microphone. And sorry, that's my dog barking to come in, the beauty of working at home. There's also a phone call or a phone number you can call in and speak with us, Chris. Just give him a second here while I go let Annie in so she stops barking.
Okay.
Still nothing? I can see him. I mean, I can't see him, but I can see his name. Does the commission have any thoughts about this that I can relay?
What is the address of this property?
Sorry, 11 River Pine Circle. It's not on an agenda. It was in your Dropbox, and it was my error in not putting it on your agenda. So I wanted to do this as your business.
Hey, Amy, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. There you are.
Sorry about that. For some reason, my audio wasn't working on my computer. Sorry about that.
Could you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. So, and I've been hearing you for a couple hours, so it was kind of. So anyway, I apologize. Thank you very much for listening to me this evening. So I think Amy had it right. We currently are, well, we are the owners of 11 River Pine Circle. We're on the Herring River. We have a dock with a float. It is secured. The float is secured by 2 and now 3 2.5-inch pipes. Last year we had pipes fail, at least one of them fail, and unfortunately our boat was attached. So we had to have a couple of emergency, one with the harbor master from Harwich, who had to run out and save our float and boat. So I have talked to our contractor who handles our float, and that's Cape Cod Docks, and they basically said that the depth of where our float is in the river is too high, and the pipes cannot handle it. So he is recommending pilings, as is the harbor master, obviously. So just wanted to get some guidance on this. Obviously, it's getting to the point where the season is coming. We'll be putting our boat in again. So I was wondering if we could get some guidance on how to move forward.
Okay. So for the commission's knowledge, pipe piles are driven usually every year. So the ice would take them out. So it is kind of routine disturbance there. I believe you're asking, a typical timber pile is about 10 inches, Chris, in diameter. And he's asking, he'd like to be able to put them in, but what's the proper procedure? Do you want to see an RDA for this? Are you okay with me handling it? It's really up to you. I provided you a copy of in your Dropbox of the latest site plan that we do have for the dock. The dock is in compliance with that plan.
I have one question, Amy, on the potential for using stub piles. Is this a location that would be suitable for stub piles?
I am not an expert in that. It is very deep there.
Okay.
So my inclination would be to say no.
How about navigation interest? Would the permanent piling be an issue for navigation?
Chris, can you describe where the pilings would go?
So that behind the floats, they would probably be, when we have a ramp to the float, it'd probably be 6-8 feet from the existing dock. So, I mean, the river's pretty wide. It's in the corner of a major bend here. So, I mean, I don't see, personally, I do not see an issue with navigation.
You're not going to stick out any farther than you are now.
No.
Okay.
Oh, we're definitely not going to stick on any further during, I mean, I'm just thinking during winter, so.
Oh, right.
Definitely not sticking on any further, right.
Yeah.
I guess my feeling is that we would want to see this with some narrative and a plan, so I don't think it should be done administratively. So that's my preference, is that we see, you know, an RDA, so we can say, okay, here's exactly where they're going to be, here's the depth, you know, mean low water, all those type of things. Otherwise, you know, I don't think there's, you know, a large resource impact compared to removing the pipes every year. So that's my thought up front. I guess I'll start with you, Stan, to see if you have any comments.
No, not at this point, I guess.
Okay. Jim, any comments on this one?
It seems like the project makes sense to move forward. As your comment, Brad, it's probably a good idea to have a plan provided at least. That's all.
Okay. Ernie?
Yeah, since these, the permanent pilings are going to go in, I assume, in the exact spots that the pipe pilings are currently in, I don't see the need to go for an RDA necessarily. You know, just looking at a map here, if the applicant submitted a plan showing where the permanent pilings will be, then I could see doing it on an administrative basis.
Okay. Let's see, Mark.
Considering they're going to be right in the same place, and from what I understood earlier, the harbor master is in support of the these piles being replaced anyway. It would be my feeling that it would be acceptable to do this administratively with the cooperation of the harbor master, just as a verification, and keep it as simple as possible.
Okay. Carolyn?
I agree with what Mark just said.
Okay. Yeah, so it does seem like a small matter. I just, over time, I really don't favor the idea of doing these things under discussion. And it sounds like a number of the commissioners haven't really seen this or thought much about this. So I guess I would like to see a site plan that just says, okay, you know, here's where they're going to be. Here's a navigation channel. Here's where mean low water is. These are permanent structures in the tidelands. So that's how I feel. It sounds like the commission is split on whether they're okay to go forward as an RDA or administrative review. So what do you think, Amy? Do you want to have a vote on this, or do you want to see a plan yourself?
We were just looking for discussion, really, and to get direction, because I didn't know really how you want it, because it is seemingly very simple. I would at least like to see a plan, and really we can use the plan that we have here, and I could just get Cape Cod Docks or Mr. Barton to verify where those pilings are going to go. We can almost do a glorified administrative review if you wanted to, and kind of go between the two options that you have, really. Usually administrative review, I am the one who signs off, me or Nikki. In this case, if you want to see plans, I'm happy to take what Mr. Barton can provide in terms of, augmenting his plan to show where the pilings are going to go, share that with you, and have you give the, essentially the okay for that instead of me. That's what some commissions, about half the commissions have administrative reviews that the administrator does, and then the other half have actually sign off on them themselves. So it's kind of between the two idea, but I do think we should see some sort of a plan that shows where these are going to go.
Okay. Amy, Brad, I agree, because again, when you asked me to talk, I mean, I was like clueless as to really, without having a real good idea of what we were going to do there. Seeing a plan, I think, is a good idea.
Okay. So that would be, if you're comfortable with it, and let me know if you're not. If you want to see the RDA, that's fine. I'll work with Mr. Barton on that. But I could be in touch with Mr. Barton to use the existing plan that he has. They just did the rocks. They did the fire rolls a couple years ago. We have plans for this area. I could work with him to show him what we need on that plan, and then I could give it to you. And then prior to my issuing anything, I would just email you all, ask you to reply to me, not and go do it that way.
Amy,
the next meeting.
When does he want to do this? What's his? He wants to do it in June.
Chris, I said soon. Chris, you can answer that question yourself.
So my timeline would be as soon as possible, just so I don't have the same issue that I had before. And so, yeah, I don't want to lose the boat and obviously cause any more problems for ourselves as well as the environment. So, however, as soon as we can, I've talked to Cape Cod Docks. They said it was very easy installation. It could take, less than a day basically to put in. And to second or to confirm what I heard, yes, they would be in the same position as the current pilings. Sorry, current pipes.
Okay, I agree with Amy, seeing a plan, and then the commission can decide from there. And so not to hold things up. It is a location that has erosional pressures. It's a fairly narrow channel. It's a bend, so I think seeing that plan will be very helpful.
Okay, Amy, I guess I can contact you in a day or so. And
yeah, I will email you the plan that we should work off of tomorrow, and really just mark where you're going to put them, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Okay. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you just leave that? I'm not sure I understand. Is that going to be done administratively, or is it going to come back for the commission?
No, you are going to, I'm going to email you the plan just to make sure it is what we're all thinking about, and you can let me know your thoughts on it. I won't issue it until I hear from people.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't want to see this held up for any particular time. I don't believe it's necessary. That's all.
Right, but I do. Yeah, that's the idea.
Yep. I'd just like to say structures, in the resource area, I don't think we should just give it a green light during a discussion period like this. So it could be very benign, but this location has had a lot of consideration in the past, and so we should see a plan. We can do that on June 3rd and let Amy know then. And so, all right, what should we tackle next, Amy?
Well, we only got 3 other things. So we got the management plan for Bell's Neck. We have a brief Plover update, and we have minutes.
Okay.
So you pick.
Yeah. And I have some other business that I have a question on.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's start with the one that'll probably take the most time, and that's the management plan for the bogs at Bell's Neck. And I'll just give a brief overview of the process and what I'd like to see happen. And I think that, we voted not long ago to form a plan that would include options on what to do for the site. And we then formed a subcommittee that met in March. And the subcommittee members are going to contribute to different options. And I think you've seen the one that I drafted, and Jim put out a plan, and then Mark had some comments. So I would like to see a document put together fairly soon that we can review and vote on and move forward. The concern has been out there that this has been going on for a while, and I agree that it has. But I also think that, it's prudent to have a document that people can review, the public can review. We can have a public hearing that people can comment on, and then we can make a vote. And I'd love to see this happen within 2 months. So you guys have heard my feelings for this location and the management many times, so I'm not going to start with my thoughts. And I think we'll just we'll go down the line, and hopefully folks had a chance to review, what has been submitted. And if somebody has ideas on a whole different option, that can be there too. There's a property owner nearby that wants to see a pond in the location. So there's a number of concepts that could be put forth in this plan, but at some point we're going to get together and vote on it. So I guess I'll keep the same order as the last one. So Stan, do you want to comment on this?
Well, I read your proposal, and I can't disagree with anything you're saying. I was originally going back to keeping the bogs, but again, going back on what Mark had indicated, we're beyond that at this point. So I guess I don't have any better option than what you're proposing.
Okay. And just to be clear, Jim put out a sketch that's very similar, but I think it just has some different features. And so, we can always work on these options and tune them as at some point we see a draft, and we can all comment on the draft formally. Jim, I guess you're up next.
Okay, yeah, I would agree that Brad's narrative is in essence similar to my ideas. Do you want to get into some of the details of this now, Brad, or just comment on the general plan here?
I think it's okay to do that. I think having some sense that we're on to a process is going to lead to a conclusion, and then if anybody wants to volunteer new concepts, that's okay too. But I think by all means, if you have any thoughts, why not air them tonight?
Well, yeah, I'll go through a few things. One thing is the mowing of the paths is currently done by a neighbor, which is nice of them to do in a way. But I feel like the Conservation Department should really be in control of that, which we're currently not. They're basically just doing what they want, and in places they're mowing fairly large areas, right up to the edge of the bog/wetland. And I agree it should get the perimeter mowed, and maybe there can even be some sections that are larger than 8 feet. I was proposing an 8-foot path around the whole perimeter, but at least it should be in places farther away from the wetland than right on the edge. I think it's important that the Conservation Department gets control of that situation. So that's one thing in respect to mowing. Another part of my idea was to maintain some of that meadow habitat that's surrounding the bogs. I think that's a valuable habitat to have there. There's a lot of forest around, but there's not much meadow. I think also some of the neighbors might appreciate that and just, recreational interest in general to have some open area amongst the forest area. So I was wondering what the rest of the commissioners thought of that idea. That's mowing. As far as the cranberry farming, I have depicted on my plan, and Brad has some fairly similar ideas. I feel like if there's interest for that, that would be a good thing to do. And if there really just isn't interest, there's no real harm in simply letting it naturalize like the remainder. One question I have for you, Brad, is in your narrative, you mentioned allowing the water to flow from the reservoir back into the river through the bogs. And I'm just concerned as to how we're going to keep the juvenile herring out of the bogs during the time that they're running. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, my thought was, to continue what's being done now with you have both netting and you have boards at the first flume. But I do mention the need to come up with a real operational plan. Once we decide what's going to happen, if it were to go that way, or any way that it goes, you'll need an operational plan that will decide exactly what's done. If it were to stay a bog, you'd want to keep the water coming in, of course. And I think I've heard from folks, they felt they wanted to have water coming in, if it's naturalized, to provide water to the wetlands. So I kind of, in my plan, I'm putting a placeholder there to come up with an operational plan on exactly what to do. But at least in the first 5 years, I think you would continue to have board management at the first flume, work with mosquito control to what they're trying to achieve, and keep that netting up. It'd be nice over time to not have the net anymore, because the net is something that has to be dealt with, and the net could possibly catch up other wildlife at some point and, cause that harm. So that's the idea, is to just come up with a hardcore operational approach to how you deal with it.
Yeah, I just see when there's only an inch of water coming over the top, I don't think it's much of an issue. But currently, I think there's about 4 or 5 inches of water over the board, or there was a few days ago. And it had actually been, the wire cage had a bunch of grass and whatnot on it, which was effectively blocking it from draining too aggressively. But when you have several inches of water coming over that, it seems to draw the juvenile herring in there. So, one idea I had was to fill it with some size of crushed stone or something, which I believe would still allow a lot of water flow, but would almost certainly keep the fish out. But anyway, that's just something to keep an eye on. That you can, in the past few weeks, there's a lot of fish in the bogs right now. I don't believe they're herring. Maybe they're small perch or something. But just swimming around in there that came in when the heavy rains really pushed the reservoir into the bogs. Well, I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, no, that's a good point. Those fish really don't want to be there, and we've got to come up with some way to keep them out. Okay, thanks. Ernie?
Hello? Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I read the proposal that you wrote, Brad, and I think it's well done. I'm in favor of naturalizing this. It just doesn't make sense to try to maintain any sort of cranberry growth in that area. I guess I'm not well versed enough to determine whether or not it should be wetland or upland in that area, but from my perspective, the least maintenance that'd be required to maintain that the better, and certainly in this fiscal environment we're in right now.
All right, thanks, Ernie. Mark?
Does anybody have any question about the information that I presented?
I'd just like to say, Mark, that I think, you know, you've been very, you know, straightforward with your interest, and I think you're very passionate about this, and I appreciate, you know, your comments. For me, I don't feel like there's been open neglect. I think we have really a fundamental disagreement on how to manage the bog. So that's kind of how I view things, but I do appreciate where you're coming from. I think it's a very valid place to be. I just, we have a disagreement more than anything else.
Just to point out one issue in the narrative that you'd presented, the town actually acquired the property back in the 60s when it was addressed earlier on as a tax taking. That was an intent to clear title, as I recall, but that's pretty much irrelevant. I still stand by the initiative that the correct management of that particular parcel would have solved all of these questions that we all have, all these concerns. That ship sailed. And unfortunately, going forward, I think now it's going to be a question of simplicity and safety. To Jim's point about the mowing, to me, the meadow is a very important issue because the open space has a lot of valid functionality. It also acts as a fire break. I think these are important considerations, and I would support a regular schedule of mowing to begin with. The water management, mosquito control, I believe, should have a lot to do with it because the mosquito population in that area is going to have a lot to do with what the water flow is going on in that old bog. So I think they should be very much involved in how to handle that. The issue with the fish, even if the bog was still in effect, that problem would have to be addressed by a solid mechanism to keep the creatures out of that culvert pipe. And there's a particular method to do that, but that's also going to require an expense and some maintenance. That's going to be something that's going to be perpetual. That's going to happen periodically. The net that's there, obviously, that's an issue for wildlife vandalism. So a permanent structure needs to be a little more thought through, but there's particular methods to do that. The simple fact that this has taken the amount of time to come to this point in discussion really, really disturbs me. The commission has had a history in excess of 50 years with this property. And here we are now, at least 6 years away from the last harvest, with a 5-year window to keep the agricultural exemption alive, and the whole thing hasn't been touched. And frankly, as a citizen of the town, I find it appalling. I don't think it's right. I think it's been overlooked, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a breach of trust of the townspeople, and I find it very offensive. So, I don't know. If you have any questions of me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Hey, Mark, I read your analysis on this, and I appreciate all the thought and expertise that you put into this too. I can't address the comment you've made as far as whether we've adequately discharged our responsibility on this, but do I assume, based on your comments and the submission that you've given us, that you're in favor of this being naturalized at this point in time, that the window is passed and we really don't have much other alternative?
I'm not going to say I'm in favor of it, Ernie, but I don't see any practical aspect otherwise. To utilize any portion of the bog right now that still has the ability to produce cranberries is going to be a very temporary solution. You can use the term organic, but without some care, any traffic from a pick your own opportunity, and again, it's going to fall to neglect because nobody's maintaining it. Nobody's taking away the weed growth. Nobody's taking away the poison ivy, all of the other things that are going to go along with the naturalization process. What's achieved by not acting is the action of going forward with naturalization. And to me, that is just open neglect. I'm not in favor of the naturalization, but I don't see a practical option.
Just one comment. In the time that I've been on the commission, I know you say we've had a 50-year history of managing these bogs, and my understanding is that we did have a contract with a grower that was in place, and he abandoned that contract.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot about this, and I'll really admit that. But from what I do know, it's the comments that I've heard are that the industry basically has deteriorated over the last number of years, and we didn't have the opportunity to really get somebody in. I mean, you looked at it yourself, and you were the only person that expressed any interest in it. We certainly don't have the expertise to manage it ourselves or to grow cranberries in there ourselves. We don't have any resources to do that. So we had to get somebody in there. Nobody raised their hand and was willing to take on the challenge. So, yeah, to say that we've neglected our responsibility in this, I take a bit of exception to that. I think we did try, and the environmental conditions and the economic conditions that we were working under just didn't support it.
I understand your point, and I don't totally agree with that, simply because of the fact there was a period of time in excess of 2 years from the last crop till I expressed interest in working with it. And I had watched diligently in that period of time to see if there was any advertisement or any quest for participation. I just didn't see any. I've heard through the grapevine of other commissioners in past years, as well as other growers in past years, there's been difficulty with various people. And to my experience and business experience, a lot of times that is simply because of lack of communication. It's not an ideal situation. The industry certainly has holes in it. Like I said from day one, for me, this was never about making money. It was about keeping something alive. My aspiration was to not lose any money at it. If I could have done that, I would have considered it successful. Very few people would approach it in that fashion. That was my particular unique situation. But point being is, the commission on the whole has a history of working with growers. And in a number of cases, there has been issues. And I'm afraid through the process of years and through the personalities, there were times when things could have been avoided. All of that is now water under the bridge. But there's a time lapse in excess of 2 years from the last crop, when the prior grower stepped away from his agreement, to go forward. And even that, and even after my inquiry, it took a substantial amount of time to get to a point where we could even begin to talk to any level of seriousness. So again, it's beating a dead horse. It's all nothing now. The ship sailed. The practical aspect of trying to do anything with it, other than a few people in town wanting to walk through and grab a few cranberries, well, that's fine, but it's going to be a short-lived experience. There was a circumstance where this was attempted on another bog in town back in the 70s, and that's exactly what took place. The foot traffic and the lack of care just allowed the property to diminish very quickly, which it's like everything else. If you don't care for it, it's going to fall by the wayside. If there's no mechanism in place to maintain the bog or maintain that section, it's going to continue to diminish. So as I said, I'm not supporting the naturalization, but I don't see any other practical avenue. And to go further, in the rest of the Bells Neck region, there's a lot of work out there that needs to be done. There's things that aren't being followed up on. We had a meeting several months ago with the town engineer and the DPW about addressing some of the issues over on Bells Neck Road on the other side. The cooperation that was expressed from the DPW was very strong. Apparently, the town engineer hasn't had the opportunity to pull together a plan yet. For the sake of keeping the area healthy, and it's more popular all the time. There's a tremendous amount of people over there. I would very much be in favor of breaking out the various projects throughout the region that need to be dealt with and ask that they become dealt with at an administrative level primarily to get things in the works. When we get bogged down in planning and paperwork and questions and answers, we spin our wheels. It's counterproductive. The storm damage that had taken place out there, it's huge. It doesn't necessarily need to be a pristine, manicured piece of land, but it should be cleaned up to a point where safety is not a concern. There's a lot of windfalls. There's a lot of hangers. I think access through the region overall in the way of rescue is a very important issue. God forbid somebody's out there and has a heart attack. How do you get to them? You know, what if there's a lightning strike in the area? What if there's a fire? These things are concerned. By the time the mobility takes place to get in the area to address the problem's way worse than it needs to be. To me, it's important to step forward with this and take responsibility for it and move to get it done.
Mark, those are good items to put into the plan.
I'm not sure if there's anything else I can add at this moment.
We have a very good working document already of the Bells Neck Land Management Plan, and it's something that I would really like assistance with tackling some of those items. I think we can do it. Add on to it.
Very much in support of assisting with this in any way we can.
Yep.
I very much support the administrative aspect to be able to make a decision. I mean, I can understand from your perspective that you don't want to necessarily take responsibility for every item and you want to share it with the commission. But if there's a safety issue and there's a tree out there that's hanging over a trail that's obvious,
yeah,
let's step forward before somebody gets hurt.
We try. I thought we were pretty good in the Bells Neck. Of course, we've had a really windy spring, but between AmeriCorps, myself, and Nikki assisting with our trails, I thought they were, I mean, Widowmaker happened it can happen overnight. But we were routinely walking the trails and at least making sure that the trails were safe. So we can definitely address those quick. And if there are trees that I can't deal with myself, then I have the DPW take them. So we will reevaluate that immediately.
And then to suggest that you personally become terribly involved in that at a physical level, that's not at all what I'm suggesting.
No. I don't mind. I like tree work. Oh, can't hear you, Mark.
Mark, you got muted.
I get him. Oh, I can't unmute him. Mark, can't hear you.
Are you taking any public comments?
Yes. What I'll do is, I think, Carolyn, you're the last commissioner that needs to comment. And then after that, I will certainly take public comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I listened carefully to all Mark had to say, and in some ways I agree, in some ways I disagree. I think this subject has come up over the past number of years, and we were divided and didn't know what to do. And so it's an important decision. So we have taken it carefully. My own opinion has changed 180 degrees. That I started out saying we need to keep it as a cranberry bog, and the more I learned about it, the more I decided in my own head that is not really the job of our local town government. It's just not government's purview. We have the responsibility to keep it safe and provide public access, but I don't see that it's the town's responsibility to, especially at this particular time, to spend any kind of money if we don't have to. And I've only walked part of it, but the part I walked was absolutely gorgeous. The trail was beautiful. There was one big log we had to climb over, but joggers were jogging right over it. So I thought it was kept up beautifully, frankly. My vote would be to naturalize it. It's just too complicated and too expensive to do otherwise.
It would appear to me that we've got a disconnect in care and custody here. Care and custody is exactly that. And when the property was taken in the inception, it had a particular function. That function was allowed to die an untimely death. It was done without the support of the townspeople. It took place from the members of this commission because the action did not take place. You can camouflage it any way you want. You can say that there wasn't time. You can say that there wasn't solid support. The fact is, nobody said yes, no, boo, maybe, nothing about it. Not for or against. It was delayed. Delayed caused the problem. The problem is now that option and that window is closed. Therefore, the townspeople are cheated out of a resource and an asset that they owned. And the 7 members of this board are responsible.
Mark, I couldn't disagree with you more. I really feel like it's a personal opinion, and there was a disagreement on what to do with it, but those options were voiced from day one. So I really think that there's a personal disagreement as to where this should go, and that's how it happened. So, I respect your opinion. I disagree with what you just said. All right. Any further comments before we ask comments from the audience? Amy, any thoughts?
No, I'm just taking it all in right now.
Okay. I wish, yeah, it's a tough forum to be doing this, but Yeah, I think we've had some really deliberate conversations during public hearings on this topic. And going back before Mark was on the committee, after Mark was on the committee, there's been a lot of deliberation, in my opinion. Are there any comments from the audience?
Yes, good evening.
You would just
my name
name. There you go. Thanks.
My name is Alan Hall. You probably all know me. I was before your board last year when this topic came up, and I was before the board a few years before that with interest in that Cranberry area. Particularly, I can't agree with Mr. Coleman. He hits the nail right on the head with everything he says, in my opinion. The care and custody of that property, it has two functions. It was public and it was private. Private meaning when it was leased out to a separate independent grower, which then that person would take care of that property. There's a lot of debate. People can say the cranberry industry is dying. Well, I don't believe that, and I don't let it go. Seventh generation doing it in this town, and it's something that we've got to keep going forward. It's no different than the Heron River fisheries, the Saquatucket Harbor fishermen. It's no different than anything that this town has promoted and been a vital part of since we were incorporated in 1694. This town has a lot of history. It's slowly, well, maybe not slowly, it's going away very fast, and it's very concerning. We own 22 acres to the north of this property. The property at one time was my grandfather's, owned the entire area. You know, there's a lot of history here, and I live right adjacent to it. I understand where you guys are at. It's unfortunate, but it just seems that the intention, in my opinion, is all the properties recently that the town has bought, Great Swamp, Main Street, Cranberry Bogs, all the bogs that were going and operating are going away. And I think that's the real common denominator, is to let them go back to naturalized and give up on the cranberries. But I guess we're just outnumbered these days, and that's okay. I did have one option or a proposal that I'd like to see if we could utilize somehow. I do have a cranberry bog just to the north of this. I've got 3 acres planted of the 8-acre cranberry area that we had. I'd like to see if you would be willing to sell the vines on that particular bog and have something in motion so that we could cut the vines next spring and keep the vines going, and people can see that they still continue on. I got an area about 2 acres that I'd like to get prepared this summer, and then have that option of those vines off to Stevens Vines, the section that's right at the inlet flume to the first bogs. It's pretty sparse in weeds and trees. It's pretty healthy looking right now, the vines are. And I'd like to see if the Conservation Commission would be willing to maybe pursue that. It wouldn't hurt anything. The vines would be mowed off with a single bar mower, baled, and then I'd give $1 to the town of Harwich, and I'd give a certificate of liability insurance in my own accord, so everybody's covered. But at least the cranberry vines can be salvaged and replanted in the adjacent property. I don't know how you feel about that.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Hall, and I think it's worth putting into the package and considering it.
Yeah, because it's too viable. Those are nice vines, those Stevens vines, and they produce a lot. So it'd be nice to carry it on and have some history continuing.
I did
any comment
in my letter.
Go ahead, Mark.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead, Mark.
I did include the option information about harvesting vines as a potential way to try to salvage something out of there. You know, grab the chest of the money off the ship that's sinking. That's what I'm suggesting. It's a useful park, and if the vines are going to wind up ultimately falling by the wayside, if there's an opportunity to salvage something, I think it's a beneficial thing to do.
Yeah, this is Ernie. I'd be well in favor of doing that as well. My only concern would be harvesting the vine. Would that have any negative impact on the rest of the bog? I mean, as far as other, no, good, okay. In that case, I'd be in favor of that.
No different than cutting hay off a piece of land, same thing.
Great, good. Not being a cranberry farmer, I defer to your judgment, Mark.
If you like cranberry sauce, that's all it takes.
All right, any further comments? I would like to move forward with this and try to have something we all can view and vet fairly soon.
My only comment is just, do you want our assistance in doing that, or is that something that you're going to put together with all of the comments here? I don't have any problem helping, and I know Nikki's going to be watching this video too. That might be a project that we can work on.
Yeah, my question for you, Amy, was do you think it's best to modify the existing plan or have like a subset that specifically deals with just the bog issue?
I think it's a subset. You can amend, you essentially can amend the Bell's Neck Land Management Plan. It's a working document, so it would be an addition to that plan. I think that would be the appropriate thing.
Okay. Then I wonder if Jim and I want to blend our option and then get language to you and Nick, and then have some of these other options put together, and then we can all go back and forth on the actual language. And then I picture the commissioners reviewing a draft ahead of a hearing, and then eventually, and maybe having a extended period to review it, you know, so that we can really think about these other issues that Mark brought up, the safety issues, working with mosquito control, and, you know, really taking on the whole property. And, but yeah, by all means, let's just work together, and then we can amend the existing plan. I would like, if you have a Word file of the existing plan, I have a PDF, but I wouldn't mind having a Word file that I can track changes, comments.
I don't have a Word file. I just have a PDF, but I can reach out to the firm that generated the report for us and see if they have a Word file.
Okay. And if not, I can just jot down comments based on the PDF, because I'd like to go through that before I resubmit my option to you guys.
I would just say that during the review period, we should give it to reviewers like Mass DER, other, you know, mosquito control, things like that to vet too.
Yep.
If we elect to harvest the vines, is there a window of time that we need to be sensitive to?
Mr. Hall, you still on?
Yes, well, obviously, you need to plant them in the spring, and I'm not prepared for this year. I would be ready for next spring. And I think, you know, if we went down there and we mowed off a little bit this year just to continue agriculture, on vines is part of agriculture. If the conservation, or we can prospect and have some agreement in there, and maybe take some samples up to the UMass Cranberry Experiment Station just to continue the agricultural intent on that property. I think that may help. And there's some arrangement agreement to purchase the vines next spring and recycle them in our cranberry bogs.
Yeah, we would just have to go through the proper, because we is a public property and in effect a public asset. We would just have to go through
all
the process. Yep.
The procurement stuff. I understand. Yeah.
Okay. Even just for cranberry vines, you gotta follow procurement.
Yeah. So Amy, I mean, if we were to allow Mr. Hall to maintain the bog, mow them, and that sort of thing this year, do we need to vote on that at a future meeting or next meeting, for example?
I wouldn't want to, I would just do that out of the kindness of my heart, just go down there and just pull a couple weeds out on them, just to inspect them. It wouldn't be any physical labor. It'd be no different than a public person walking in and just walking on the property. But at least we can take some samples up to the UMass station so that you continue with the agriculture intent. I would assume will back to the authority, so you can pretty much do what you need to do. But
yeah, I think for the purposes of exploration, that would be okay, but it would have to be very minor sampling.
Right. Yes. You know, just take some up there, and then just it has it documented with the UMass Cranberry Experiment Station that they reviewed the vines. There's no diseases and blah blah blah, and then it's documented for the Harwich Conservation Commission. That will keep the.
So for the record, I would suggest that we approve that Amy, on an administrative basis, work with Mr. Hall to perform those cuttings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, all you need is like a couple pounds. It's not a big deal.
Yep. Good.
Yeah, that's
that
fine.
way it keeps the agriculture, going, and the intent's there, so it's documented, and just we can get this sampling done on the vines, and it keeps it just moving forward. So that whatever comes out of it, naturalizing or whatever, the vines can be recycled and continue on.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, would this require a standard RFP to make this available for anybody that wants to utilize that opportunity?
I have to talk with our procurement people. I'm not well versed in it.
That may be a question that we need to ask for the sake of information going forward, because if that's going to take place, there's going to be a fairly small window. It's going to be probably a month window that's going to have to be done within.
Right.
For the testing, Mark?
I'm sorry?
What a month window for what?
To go ahead and cut the vines and take them off the bog. You're probably going to want to do that, next March or April, I would think.
Yeah, you'd like to have the RFP done before March, people, I would recommend that year.
Right. That's what
that shouldn't be a problem.
Take place. Make it available to the public if somebody wants to take an opportunity to do it, get it ahead, get it out of the way, because it's going to be, I think it would be very simple to do. It's a matter of advertising, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like surplus equipment.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. And I would just like to say I do want us to vet these options fully, and I still think the pick your own option has some viability. So that could lead to, surplusing some of the vines, but not all of them. So I don't want folks to think that, we're not going to discuss that option once we have a draft to review. People are picking right now. It's been happening ever since the last leasee left. So it could be a public service that might not last forever, but it's certainly been going on for 5 years.
The vines are going to continue to grow, Brad, with any kind of luck at all. So, that's not going to kill them. It's like mowing the grass. You're going to cut them off and they're going to grow back.
Good.
I'm going to know. If they're mowed in April, next April, you're not going to see any berries to speak of that fall like you normally would. But the following year, you'll start to see some new ones because they're going to replenish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that could be a feature of, that'd be a win for two causes. Okay. All right. So we've kind of have a schedule and a mission, and I'm going to work closely with Amy to try to, review the full plan. And then I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity to have people chime in as they want to offer comments and review. And we can, think out of the box. It's a huge property. And there's a lot that can be done. So it's a great asset. Any last comments on this item? All right, moving on. We have a plover update, Amy, I believe.
Yep. Before I do that, so I don't forget, because I didn't write it down, so it's in the mind. Yesterday, over at Robbins Pond Conservation Area, we put in 2 big cement blocks because with the previous lessee no longer leasing it, the public activity there has gotten more and more extreme. So people had made basically what was a trail, a road, and we're driving down not just in ATVs or on their bikes, but like in trucks and more frequently, and having fires and picnics and basically next to the pond. And it was really becoming a very, very attractive nuisance. So we didn't block the public road in any way, but we did block that new road, if you will, with big, large cement blocks. And also took down a hazard tree that was over the road. So just wanted to let you know that we did that. Still hope that, at some point at town meeting, we can get CPC funding for actual gates and whatnot. But in the meantime, I hope I acted appropriately on your behalf to dissuade some vandalism of the property.
Amy, can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was actually there on Sunday, I believe. And when did you say you put the blocks in? Was it?
Yesterday.
Yeah, okay. You know what? I hadn't been there in a few months, and I really noticed that, particularly over in the old borrow pit area, it's really been expanded just from, it's becoming almost a regional destination for ATV, activities. People are coming from out of town with dirt bikes and ATVs in their trucks and unloading them and having fun down there. That's pretty abusive to the property. And if you're down there on a Saturday, you wouldn't really want to be walking there or having a dog there or anything. There's just so many ATVs. So I'm glad you did that. I'm not sure if that will really curtail the activity I'm talking about. There was an off-road track down there while I was there, and that probably helps with that. But I was considering asking if we could make some sort of formal request as a commission to have the police department patrol that area at certain times. I know we talked informally with the chief a couple of years ago, right, and he seemed amenable to that. But I feel like we are neglecting our responsibility to take responsibility for that property. I mean, eventually, someone will inevitably get seriously injured or killed with that sort of stuff going on, jumping and whatnot. I know it's fun. I used to do it when I was a kid too, but it's really pretty aggressive, the activity down there. You might see 20 vehicles on a Saturday. And then of course there's the bonfires and whatnot on the Friday nights. But I do feel like that can be curtailed just by some select patrols and a few citations issued. And I wonder how we could make that formal request, or if the other commissioners would be interested in that.
I can definitely write something up on the commission's behalf and share it with you. We can send it to the police department. So it's not just from me, it's from you as a commission.
I have a remark on the
copy of the Board of Selectmen. Go ahead.
I'm wondering if maybe we should reconsider the approach here. In asking the police department to patrol it, we continue to cut off the access, and that doesn't deter the problem. Maybe we need to rethink this, and maybe we need to make it accessible to accept patrols on a more regular basis, and then it can actually be effectively policed.
It is a difficult road.
It's a very difficult road. But, with some thought, that may be an avenue.
Yeah, I mean, I know the police, I don't think I have much problem getting in there. I just drove there with my small car. I mean, it's not, sometimes the puddles are deep, but you can normally get through with just a car, and they have SUVs. So,
I do now. No problem.
There's a lot going on down there of illegal activity of various kinds. But that is our town's law and our state law that ATVs aren't allowed on that property, and we're not enforcing that. And that's our responsibility, that I understand. It's tough. It's a little bit out of the way, but the police are completely ignoring it, and that's why it's becoming a regional destination, not just a couple neighborhood kids riding their dirt bikes. It's considered a safe place to come from out of town and unload your dirt bikes and, spend the day with a couple dozen other people. But that's, not what the town bought the property for, and it's illegal based on our town laws. And if anybody wants to go for a walk there, they really can't. During those times, or not safely anyway.
It's gotten really, really bad. So, I mean, the little thing that we did the other day is not going to stop the dirt bike activity, because they're coming in from so many different side trails and different places. But I do agree that enhanced patrols would help send the message. I mean, you just get cops out there a few times, the word gets around that it's not a place that you can go to and not be bothered anymore. But I was, when I saw the big tire tracks and the fires, which I knew fires had happened there, but it's really with trucks being able to drive down and around the bogs freely, we needed to do something. So it was just a small measure, but hopefully it'll help a little bit for the time being. And we can definitely draft something for the police department.
Yeah, I do appreciate you doing that, Amy. That was one thing that was going on. So the trucks were all driving down there and unloading their dirt bikes. So in a way, it would have been easy to, it would have been very hard for them to get away if someone was trying to give them a citation.
Right.
They have to load their dirt bike back on their truck to get over. But I really do appreciate you paying attention and getting those barriers in there. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I try to, as much as I can, I try. So getting to Clovers, unless people have more questions about Robbins Pond. So Clovers, just to let you know, our Red River chicks are due to hatch next week, mid to late next week. Hopefully that goes well. We're going to be putting those cement barricades up at Red River Beach like we had the past 2 years, closing the last third of the parking lot off. Put up some signage today. Didn't want people to think that it was because of COVID or anything like that. Maybe I should have just let that be, because I got a lot of comments about the plovers when I was down there today. Fledge right before 4th of July, like they typically do. So if we just keep them happy, they'll fledge and we'll have a peaceful rest of the summer. Bank Street, still kind of figuring out where exactly they're going to be laying nests, so that could be a little bit longer. We do officially have to start patrolling the beaches very actively once the birds hatch at both Bank and Red River will be soon. So I do have some cooperation from other departments to help with those patrols, but I will let the commission know, because I may need people to step in on a random basis, but I hope not, and I hope if I do that it's not often. That's my Clover update.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for all that work, too.
Not so bad being on the beach like a day like today.
Yeah. Yeah, nice to have the sun day after day, finally. I think we've got one set of minutes. I think Stan had something. Anything else, Amy, for us?
Nope, I'm just going to open up the minutes. So if you have any edits, I can make them. Just give me a second to log into that.
Okay. I went through them ahead of time, and I have no comments.
Carolyn, you must have something.
I don't. I had a hard time finding them.
All right, they're at the very end.
I know, but it wasn't coming up at the very end. I had to actually search it. I don't know.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on the April 15th minutes?
Yeah, Amy, you have one typo under the discussion and possible vote at the end.
Oh, let me get to the end. Hold on. Okay.
In the second paragraph, there's a comment about Donovan doesn't support, there should be any hard solutions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I saw.
Got it.
Any other comments on the minutes for April 15th? I'd move that we accept the minutes for April 15th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ernie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. I guess just down to you, Stan. Is that the last thing we have?
Unless somebody else has. So, we were talking about violations before, so I just want to bring up my topic of docks again. And I guess, where does all that stand? I guess that last survey I did, there were 6 docks, 2 of which I know they've been out there for 3 years in a row on the salt marsh.
I will touch with Nikki on that. I did task her with taking your list and creating letters.
Because, like I said, 2 of them have been there every year since I've been aware of it. So, and I guess I think from what you've said in the past, we really have to give them a warning. You can't just go out and find them at this point. I mean, they've been doing it.
Well, the question, Stan, is have they been warned before? I mean, this has come up, and I think letters went out before.
Some letters did go out before, yes.
Well, I know the 2 that I think of. I'm just looking at my list. The 3rd dock, the 4th dock on north of Lower County Road. So 7 Herring Run is one that I know has been there every year, for 3 years. And 6 Chase Street, I guess.
Okay. I will touch base with Nikki on that. We'll get that. We'll get those out.
But those are the 2 that I remember seeing previously. The others I don't recall. But okay.
Stan, they've been out there for many, many years. It really goes way back.
No. Well, one of them I know, I just saw this first time. The one, matter of fact, they showed Carolyn when we were looking at the proposed dock when we were doing a site the last meeting, even though it was getting postponed. And it was the one on 10 Mill Point Road. That one was already in the water, and I could see from the property over, I pointed out to Carolyn where the dock had been, and you could see the bare area in the marsh where the dock had been laying in there. Really destroyed it, so. But yeah, I can't, I'm sure, Brad, you've been aware.
Yeah, it's been a little frustrating. There's places along Chase Street where there's scars that linger for years because the dock's in a different place every year. And so the footprint of the damage is really pretty large. And so, you know, I think it's something that we should probably just, you know, put a focus on it and see where it goes. Amy, if you could copy myself, maybe Ernie, or just put the Conservation Commission, and so that, you know, we see the letters when they go out, that'd be good.
And we will tackle that next week. I will make sure that it is a priority for Nikki and I.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Stan, for getting out there and paddling around.
Thank you,
Stan. I was out again today, but out on Pleasant Bay.
That's a good life.
Oh, I have one other thing for you. In regards to a court case that you've all been asking for a while, where's it going? Well, put it this way, we're pursuing, I've talked to counsel, I'll put it on executive session, but we are pursuing the legal action on those. So can't speak openly about it. We're not in executive session, but the commission wanted an update. I finally did speak with counsel, and the cases are being pursued.
Including the one I've been asking about, Amy?
Yes.
Okay.
What, has anything happened with that latest one, Amy, with the state? You know, where they...
I'll put an executive session on. I really can't talk directly about it. Short answer.
Nothing direct, but it's something going.
No.
Okay, I have nothing else.
That's all she wrote.
All right. Anybody else have anything else for tonight? Oh, thanks everybody again. This is working out okay, I think. Not as much fun as being in person.
Together.
Well, I do know that we are working on a plan to potentially, I heard today, potentially the selectmen are working on a plan to be able to have them resume some actual public meetings. What that's going to look like exactly, we don't know. I mean, physical public meetings. But I mean, as soon as they do, and we can figure out how it'll work for us. Okay.
I really miss the site visits, especially as we're talking about the Bell's Neck area. I think it would be very beneficial to walk that whole area together and say, this part is this, and this part is this, and this is exactly what I want to do here.
So we can now. We could do that. We could do site visits. You'd all have to go in your own cars. We would have to wear masks. There can't be more than 10 people. There's not 10 of us anyways. Have to maintain distance. But we can, if you want, we can start resuming that.
Yeah, I agree with Carolyn. I missed that. Hearing you're spinning on a lot of this stuff.
They're very valuable.
Well, no, as opposed to me looking at it and seeing it from a whole different perspective, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to get back to somewhat normal. Okay?
All right, well, thank you. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Second by Ernie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. And we'll
good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This conference is no longer being recorded.